The rain fell in sheets over London. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of neon through Ethan Caldwell's windshield. At 34, Ethan was a man who had everything: money, power, a penthouse overlooking the Thames, yet he felt emptier than ever. His real estate empire, Caldwell Properties, had made him a millionaire by 30, but tonight, his wealth couldn't shield him from the storm brewing in his personal life. Victoria, his girlfriend of 2 years, had just sent him a text that cut deeper than any argument they'd ever had. "If you can't give me what I want, I'll find someone who can." What she wanted was a £50,000 investment in her failing fashion startup, a demand she'd made after a heated argument at his office earlier that day. Ethan had refused, tired of her constant manipulation, but her words lingered, fueling his frustration as he drove aimlessly through the city. He pulled over near Camden Market, the streets slick with rain, the usual bustle replaced by a quiet unease. Ethan stepped out of his sleek black Mercedes, his tailored coat soaked within seconds, and headed toward a small cafe to clear his head. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a barista wiping down the counter and a figure huddled in the corner, her face hidden beneath a tattered hoodie. Ethan ordered a black coffee, his mind still on Victoria, when he noticed the girl in the corner. She was young, maybe 16 or 17, her hands trembling as she clutched a cracked plastic cup, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. Ethan sat at a table near the window, sipping his coffee, but his gaze kept drifting to the girl. Her clothes were threadbare, her sneakers soaked through, and her dark skin glistened with rain. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, her cheeks hollow, her posture tense. Ethan's first instinct was to ignore her. He had enough problems of his own, but something about her haunted expression tugged at him. He thought of his younger sister, Lily, who had died in a car accident at 16, and the memory stirred a pang of guilt. He couldn't just sit there. "Hey," Ethan called softly, leaning toward her table. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched, her eyes wide with fear, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might bolt. But then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, her accent thick with the cadence of West Africa. I'm fine. Please don't call anyone." Ethan frowned, setting down his coffee. "I'm not calling anyone. You just look like you need help. When's the last time you ate?" Her eyes darted to the door again, then back to him, as if weighing whether to trust him. Finally, she muttered, 3 days. Ethan's stomach twisted. He waved the barista over and ordered a sandwich and a hot chocolate, sliding them across the table to the girl. "Eat," he said simply. No strings attached. She hesitated, her hands hovering over the food, then tore into the sandwich with a hunger that made Ethan's chest ache. Between bites, she mumbled, "Thank you. My name is Kemi." "Ethan," he replied, watching her carefully. "Where are you from, Kemi?" She froze, her eyes flickering with panic. "Why? I can't say." "Please, don't ask." Ethan raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Okay, I won't. But you don't look like you have anywhere to go. It's pouring out there. Do you need a place to stay for the night?" Kemi's gaze hardened, suspicion replacing her fear. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because I've had a terrible day, and helping someone feels better than wallowing in my own problems. I have a guest room in my flat. You can stay there, get some rest, and figure out your next move. I'm not asking for anything in return." Kemi studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deceit. Finally, she nodded, her voice small. "Okay, but just for tonight." Ethan's penthouse was a stark contrast to the gritty streets of Camden, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and modern art lining the walls. Kemi stood in the foyer, her tattered backpack clutched to her chest, her eyes wide as she took in the luxury. Ethan showed her to the guest room, a minimalist space with a plush bed and an ensuite bathroom, and handed her a set of clean clothes, sweatpants, and a t-shirt that had belonged to Lily. "Get some rest," Ethan said, his tone gentle. "We'll talk in the morning." Kemi nodded, but as Ethan turned to leave, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm from Nigeria, Lagos, Wan. I ran away. I'm not supposed to be here." Ethan turned back, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, not supposed to be here?" Kemi's eyes filled with tears, and she sank onto the bed, her words spilling out in a rush. "My father was a journalist. He wrote stories about a corrupt official, Chief Balagan, who was stealing money from our community. Balagan sent men to our house. They killed my parents and my brother. I escaped, but I had nowhere to go. A smuggler named Depo helped me get to the UK, but I owe him money, £5,000. He's looking for me. If he finds me, he'll hurt me. And if the police find me, they'll send me back to Nigeria. I can't go back. Balagan will kill me." Ethan stood frozen, the weight of her words crashing over him. Kemi wasn't just a runaway, she was an undocumented immigrant. A child caught in a web of corruption and danger that stretched across continents. He wanted to help, but he had no idea where to start. "You're safe here," he said finally, his voice firm. "I won't let anyone hurt you. We'll figure this out." Kemi nodded, tears streaming down her face, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Ethan left the room, his mind racing. He had promised to protect her, but how? He knew nothing about immigration law, smuggling, or corrupt Nigerian officials. And then there was Victoria, her threat still loomed, and he had a sinking feeling she wouldn't take kindly to him helping another girl, even one as young and vulnerable as Kemi. The next morning, Ethan woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of clattering in the kitchen. He found Kemi standing at the counter, a pot of tea brewing, her movements careful but practiced. She looked different in the morning light, her dark eyes bright with a quiet resilience, her hair pulled back in a neat braid. She'd clearly made herself at home, and for a moment, Ethan felt a flicker of warmth he hadn't felt in years. "I made tea," Kemi said, her voice shy. "In Nigeria, we drink tea with milk and sugar." "I hope you like it," Ethan smiled, taking the cup she offered. "Thank you, Kemi. You didn't have to do this." She shrugged, her expression softening. "You helped me. It's the least I can do." They sat at the dining table, the city skyline stretching out beyond the windows, and Ethan decided it was time to ask more questions. "Tell me about Depo," he said gently. "How did you meet him? And how are you supposed to pay him back?" Kemi's hands tightened around her cup, her voice low. "After my family was killed, I hid in a market in Lagos. Depo found me. He said he could get me to the UK where I'd be safe. He took all the money I had, my father's savings, about £2,000, but he said I still owed him £5. Oh, for the journey. He smuggled me in a cargo ship, then a truck. It took weeks. When we got to London, he gave me a phone and said I had 1 month to get the money, or he'd find me. That was 2 weeks ago." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And what happens if you don't pay?" Kemi's voice trembled. "He said he'd sell me. To men. Or he'd turn me over to immigration. I don't know which is worse." Ethan felt a surge of anger, his hands balling into fists. He'd heard stories of human trafficking, but hearing it from a 16-year-old girl who'd already lost everything made it real in a way he couldn't ignore. "We're not letting that happen," he said firmly. "I'll help you pay Depo, but we need to find a way to get you legal status here. You can't keep running." Kemi shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't pay him. If you give him money, he'll just ask for more. He's dangerous, Ethan, and I can't go to the police, they'll deport me." Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed on the table. It was Victoria. He hesitated, then answered, his voice curt. "What do you want?" Victoria's tone was icy. "I heard you didn't come home last night. Where are you, Ethan? And who's the girl I saw you with at the cafe?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're spying on me now?" "I have my sources," Victoria snapped. "If you're cheating on me, Ethan, I'll make sure everyone knows. Your investors, your clients, everyone. Don't test me." I'm not cheating, Ethan growled, his patience fraying. She's a kid who needed help. Not that you'd understand what that means. Victoria laughed, a cold, bitter sound. A kid? Sure, Ethan. I'm coming over. We need to talk. She hung up before he could respond, and Ethan cursed under his breath. He turned to Kemi, who was watching him with wide eyes. That was my girlfriend, he said, his voice tight. She's on her way here. You need to stay out of sight. She can't know about you, not yet. Kemi nodded, her expression a mix of fear and determination. I'll stay in the room. But Ethan, be careful. She sounds dangerous. Ethan forced a smile, though his stomach churned. Don't worry. I can handle Victoria. But as he watched Kemi disappear into the guest room, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. Victoria's jealousy, Depo's threats, and Kemi's precarious situation were a storm he wasn't prepared for, and it was only just beginning. Ethan paced the living room of his penthouse, the city skyline a blur beyond the rain-streaked windows. Victoria would be here any minute, and he needed to keep her from discovering Kemi. The last thing he needed was for Victoria's jealousy to spiral into something dangerous, not when Kemi was already running from a smuggler and the threat of deportation. He glanced at the guest room door, where Kemi was hiding, and took a deep breath. He could handle Victoria. He had to. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound that cut through the silence. Ethan opened the door to find Victoria standing there, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Despite the rain, her designer coat dripping onto the marble floor. Her green eyes were cold, her lips pressed into a thin line as she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. So, Victoria said, her voice dripping with venom, where's your little charity case? Don't tell me you've already sent her packing. Ethan closed the door, his jaw tight. I told you, she's a kid who needed help. She's not here anymore. Can we focus on us for once? Victoria laughed, a sharp, bitter sound, and tossed her coat onto the couch. Us? There is no us if you're sneaking around with some girl behind my back, Ethan. I saw you at the cafe. You bought her food. You drove her away in your car. Do you think I'm stupid? Ethan's patience snapped. She was starving, Victoria. She hadn't eaten in days. I gave her a meal and a place to stay for the night. That's it. You're the one who's been threatening me, demanding money for your failing business. If anyone's ruining this relationship, it's you. Victoria's eyes narrowed, her voice low and dangerous. Don't turn this on me, Ethan. You've been distant for months. And now you're playing hero to some random girl? I don't buy it. Where is she? Before Ethan could respond, a soft thud came from the guest room. Victoria's head snapped toward the sound, her expression darkening. What was that? Nothing, Ethan said quickly, stepping in front of her. You're hearing things. Let's sit down and talk. But Victoria was already moving, her heels clicking on the marble floor as she strode toward the guest room. Ethan grabbed her arm, his voice urgent. Victoria, stop. You're overreacting. She yanked her arm free, her eyes blazing. Get off me, Ethan. I'm not leaving until I see who you're hiding. She pushed open the guest room door, and there stood Kemi, her tattered backpack clutched to her chest, her dark eyes wide with fear. She'd clearly been trying to stay quiet, but a book had fallen from the nightstand, betraying her presence. Victoria froze, her gaze raking over Kemi, her worn clothes, her braided hair, the fear etched into her young face. So this is her, Victoria said, her voice icy. Your little project. What is she, Ethan? Some runaway you picked up off the street? Kemi's voice trembled, but she held her ground. I'm not his project. He helped me because I had nowhere else to go. Please, don't be angry. Victoria turned to Ethan, her expression a mix of fury and disbelief. She's a child, Ethan. What the hell are you doing with her? Do you have any idea how this looks? Ethan stepped between them, his voice firm. She's 16 and she's in trouble. Her family was killed in Nigeria, and she's hiding from a smuggler who brought her here. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm trying to keep her safe. Something you wouldn't understand because all you care about is money. Victoria's face twisted with rage. Don't you dare lecture me about morality, Ethan. You're harboring an illegal immigrant. Do you know what that could do to your reputation? To your business? If the authorities find out, you'll be ruined. And I won't let you drag me down with you. Ethan's stomach dropped. You're not going to the authorities, Victoria. You wouldn't. She smirked, her voice cold. Try me. Either she's gone by tomorrow or I make a call. Your choice. With that, she grabbed her coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding. Victoria's threat was real. He knew her well enough to know she'd follow through if he didn't comply. But he couldn't abandon Kemi, not after hearing her story, not when she had nowhere else to go. He turned to Kemi, who was trembling, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll leave. I don't want to ruin your life. Ethan knelt in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. You're not going anywhere, Kemi. I promise to help you, and I will. Victoria doesn't get to decide what I do. We'll figure this out together. Kemi nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. She's right, though. If the police find me, they'll send me back. And if Dapo finds me first. We won't let that happen, Ethan said, though he wasn't sure how to keep that promise. I need to make some calls. I have a friend who might be able to help with your immigration status. But first, we need to deal with Dapo. Do you know where he is? Kemi hesitated, then pulled a cracked phone from her backpack. He calls me on this. He said he's in London, but I don't know where. He tracks the phone. He always knows where I am. Ethan's blood ran cold. He's tracking you? Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, Kemi admitted, her voice breaking. I thought if I turned it off, he'd get angry and come looking for me sooner. But he hasn't called in a few days. Maybe he's given up. Ethan shook his head, his mind racing. He hasn't given up. He's biding his time. We need to get rid of that phone now. He took the phone from her, removed the SIM card, and smashed it under his heel. Kemi flinched at the sound, but Ethan's expression softened. It's okay. He can't track you anymore. But we need to move fast. I'm taking you somewhere safe until we can sort this out. Ethan somewhere safe was a small flat in East London, a property he'd bought as an investment but never used. It was modest compared to his penthouse, a one-bedroom with peeling wallpaper and a creaky radiator, but it was off the grid, a place Dapo and Victoria wouldn't think to look. He drove Kemi there under the cover of darkness, the rain still falling in a steady drizzle, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside the flat, Ethan set up a makeshift bed for Kemi on the couch, handing her a blanket and a burner phone he'd bought on the way. Use this if you need to call me, he said. I'm going to meet with a friend tomorrow, a lawyer named Sarah, who specializes in immigration cases. She might be able to help with your status, but I need you to stay here and keep the doors locked. Don't go outside. Don't answer the door for anyone but me. Understand? Kemi nodded, clutching the blanket to her chest. Thank you, Ethan. I don't know why you're doing this for me, but thank you. Ethan managed a small smile. Get some rest, Kemi. We've got a long road ahead. He left the flat, locking the door behind him, and drove back to his penthouse, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He needed to deal with Victoria, find a way to neutralize Dapo, and secure Kemi's safety, all while keeping his business intact. It felt like an impossible task, but he couldn't back down now. Kemi's life depended on him. The next morning, Ethan met Sarah at a quiet cafe near Lincoln's Inn, the heart of London's legal district. Sarah was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with a reputation for taking on tough immigration cases. She listened as Ethan explained Kemi's situation, her family's murder, her illegal entry into the UK, the smuggler who was after her. When he finished, Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. She's in a precarious position, Sarah said, sipping her espresso. As an unaccompanied minor, she might qualify for asylum, especially given the political persecution her family faced. But we'd need evidence, documents, witness statements, anything that can corroborate her story. And the smuggler complicates things. If he's as dangerous as you say, we need to keep her hidden until we can file her claim. The Home Office doesn't take kindly to undocumented immigrants, and if they find her first, she'll be deported before we can make a case. Ethan nodded, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. What do we need to do? First, we need to gather evidence, Sarah said. Anything from Nigerian news articles about her father's work, police reports, even social media posts that mention the official who targeted her family. I'll start the paperwork for an asylum claim, but it'll take time. In the meantime, you need to keep her safe. And Ethan, you need to be careful. Harboring an undocumented immigrant is a legal gray area. If this blows up, you could face charges. Ethan's stomach churned, but he pushed the fear aside. I understand. I'll get you whatever you need. Just help her, Sarah. She's been through enough. Sarah gave him a small, reassuring smile. I'll do my best, but you need to watch your back. If this smuggler is tracking her, he might already know where you live. Ethan spent the rest of the day digging into Kemi's past, using his contacts to search for information about her father's work in Lagos. He found a few articles, online pieces, written by a journalist named Adebayo Ogunlaye, exposing corruption in the Lagos state government. One article mentioned Chief Balogun, a powerful official accused of embezzling millions of naira from a community development fund. The article ended with a note that Adebayo had been found dead shortly after its publication, his family presumed to have fled. It was a start, but Ethan needed more. He was about to call Kemi to check on her when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you have the girl. Bring her to the docks at midnight, or I come for you both. Depot. Ethan's blood ran cold. Dapo had found him faster than he'd expected. He didn't know how the smuggler had gotten his number, but it didn't matter. The threat was real, and midnight was only a few hours away. Ethan's first instinct was to call the police, but he stopped himself. If the authorities got involved, Kemi would be deported. He had to handle this himself. He grabbed his coat and drove to the flat in East London, his heart pounding. When he arrived, Kemi was sitting on the couch, the burner phone clutched in her hands, her face pale with fear. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling. He called me. Dapo. He said he knows where I am. He said he's coming for me. Ethan's heart raced as he processed Kemi's words. Dapo had found them despite the smashed phone, despite their precautions. The smuggler's reach was longer than Ethan had anticipated, and now they were out of time. He glanced at Kemi, her small frame trembling on the couch, her dark eyes wide with terror. He couldn't let Dapo get to her. He wouldn't. We need to move, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. He knows you're here, but he doesn't know I'm with you. We'll go to the docks, but I'm not handing you over. I'll deal with him. Kemi shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You can't, Ethan. Dapo's dangerous. He has men, big men with knives. They'll hurt you. I should go alone. It's my debt, not yours. No, Ethan said firmly, kneeling in front of her. You're not facing him alone. I promise to keep you safe. And I will. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Kemi hesitated, then nodded, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her borrowed sweatshirt. Okay, I trust you. Ethan stood, his mind racing. He needed a plan, and fast. He couldn't call the police without risking Kemi's deportation, but he couldn't face Dapo unprepared either. He opened a drawer in the flat's small kitchen and pulled out a can of pepper spray he'd bought years ago for self-defense. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He handed Kemi the burner phone, his voice urgent. If anything goes wrong, you call Sarah. Her number's in there. Tell her everything, and she'll get you to safety. Understand? Kemi nodded, clutching the phone to her chest. What are you going to do? I'm going to offer him money, Ethan said, his jaw tight. Enough to make him back off. If that doesn't work, I'll figure it out. The docks were a maze of rusted shipping containers and flickering streetlights, the air thick with the smell of salt water and diesel. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick, reflecting the dim glow of the moon. Ethan parked his car a safe distance away, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of Depo. Kemi sat in the passenger seat, her hands trembling, her breath shallow. "Stay here," Ethan said, his voice low. "Keep the doors locked. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, you call Sarah and get out of here." Kemi grabbed his arm, her voice a desperate whisper. "Please, Ethan, be careful." Ethan gave her a reassuring nod, though his stomach churned with fear. He stepped out of the car, the pepper spray tucked into his coat pocket, and walked toward the meeting point. Depo had specified a clearing near a stack of containers marked with red paint. The docks were eerily quiet, the only sound the distant hum of a cargo ship and the occasional splash of water against the pier. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a hood. Two other men flanked him, their hands resting on the hilts of knives strapped to their belts. The man in the center pulled back his hood, revealing a scarred face and cold, calculating eyes. Ethan knew immediately this was Depo. "Where's the girl?" Depo asked, his voice a low growl, his Nigerian accent thick. "I told you to bring her." Ethan stood his ground, his heart pounding. "She's not coming. I'm here to pay her debt. £5,000, right? I'll give you £10,000, double what she owes. You take the money and leave her alone." Depo laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "You think this is about money, rich man? That girl is worth more than £10,000 in the market. Men pay good money for girls like her, young, pretty, desperate. You bring her to me, or I take her myself." Ethan's blood boiled, his hand tightening around the pepper spray in his pocket. "You're not touching her. I'll give you the money, and you walk away. That's the deal." Depo's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "You don't make deals with me. You're in my world now." He nodded to his men, who stepped forward, their knives glinting in the moonlight. Ethan acted on instinct, pulling the pepper spray from his pocket and aiming it at the nearest man. The spray hit him square in the face, and he screamed, dropping his knife as he clawed at his eyes. The second man lunged at Ethan, but he dodged, grabbing a rusted pipe from the ground and swinging it with all his strength. The pipe connected with the man's knee, sending him to the ground with a howl of pain. Depo roared, pulling a gun from his waistband and aiming it at Ethan. "You're a dead man," he shouted, his finger tightening on the trigger. Before he could fire, a scream pierced the night. Kemi had disobeyed Ethan's orders. She'd left the car and was running toward them, a metal rod in her hands. "Leave him alone," she shouted, swinging the rod at Depo's arm. The gun went off, the bullet ricocheting off a container, but the impact of the rod knocked the weapon from Depo's hand. Ethan tackled Depo to the ground, his fists flying as he pummeled the smuggler's face. Depo fought back, his strength overwhelming, but Kemi grabbed the fallen gun and pointed it at him, her hands shaking. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice raw with fear and rage. "I'll shoot you, Depo!" "I swear I will." Depo froze, his scarred face twisted with fury, but he raised his hands in surrender. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving, and took the gun from Kemi, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Get up," he growled at Depo. "You're done." Depo spat blood onto the ground, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll find you, both of you." Ethan pressed the gun to Depo's temple, his voice cold. "If you come near her again, I'll kill you. That's a promise." He tied Depo's hands with a piece of rope he found nearby, then did the same to the other two men who were still groaning in pain. Ethan called Sarah, his voice urgent. "I need you at the docks now. Bring the police." "We've got a smuggler and 2 of his men. Kemi's safe, but we need help." Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by 2 officers. She'd already briefed them on Kemi's situation, emphasizing her status as a victim of trafficking and political persecution. The officers arrested Depo and his men, taking them into custody on charges of human trafficking and assault. Kemi stood beside Ethan, her small frame trembling, but her eyes were fierce with a newfound strength. "You did it," Ethan said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now." Kemi shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Not yet. There's still Balagan. And your girlfriend. She'll turn me in." Ethan's stomach twisted. Kemi was right, Victoria's threat still loomed. And Chief Balagan, the man who'd killed her family, was a shadow they couldn't ignore. But for now, they'd won a small victory. Dapo was gone, and Kemi was one step closer to safety. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional revelations. Sarah filed Kemi's asylum claim, using the evidence Ethan had gathered about her father's journalism and Chief Balagan's corruption. The arrest of Dapo and his men bolstered her case. Kemi was officially recognized as a victim of trafficking, granting her temporary protection from deportation while her claim was processed. But the threat of Balagan loomed large, and Ethan knew they needed more than legal protection to keep Kemi safe. He hired a private investigator to dig into Balagan's activities, hoping to find evidence that could bring the corrupt official to justice. The investigator uncovered a web of corruption that stretched from Lagos to London. Balagan had ties to international smuggling rings, including Depo's operation, and had been using his position to traffic vulnerable girls like Kemi for years. The investigator also found a witness, a former aide to Balagan, who was willing to testify in exchange for immunity. With this evidence, Sarah worked with Interpol to build a case against Balagan, and within weeks, he was arrested in Lagos, his empire crumbling under the weight of global scrutiny. But while Kemi's past was being resolved, Ethan's present was falling apart. Victoria had followed through on her threat. She'd tipped off a tabloid about Ethan harboring an illegal immigrant, spinning the story to paint him as a reckless playboy. The article went viral, and Caldwell Properties stock plummeted as investors pulled out, fearing a scandal. Ethan's board of directors called an emergency meeting, demanding answers, and for the first time in his career, he felt his empire slipping through his fingers. He confronted Victoria at her flat, his voice shaking with anger. "You had no right to do this, Victoria. You knew Kemi was in danger, and you still sold her out. For what? To hurt me?" Victoria smirked, her arms crossed. "You brought this on yourself, Ethan. You chose that girl over me. Did you really think I'd just sit back and let you ruin us? I gave you a chance to get rid of her, and you didn't take it." Ethan's hands balled into fists, but he forced himself to stay calm. "There is no us, Victoria. There hasn't been for a long time. You're out of my life for good." He walked away, leaving Victoria seething, but the damage was done. The scandal had cost him millions, and his reputation was in tatters. But as he sat in his penthouse that night, Kemi beside him, he realized something he didn't care. The money, the power, the status, it all paled in comparison to the bond he'd formed with Kemi. She wasn't just a girl he'd helped, she was family. Months later, Kemi's asylum claim was approved, granting her permanent residency in the UK. She enrolled in a local school, her dream of becoming a journalist like her father finally within reach. Ethan, meanwhile, rebuilt his company, focusing on affordable housing projects inspired by Kemi's story. The scandal had humbled him, but it had also given him a new purpose to use his wealth for good, to help those who needed it most. Victoria, humiliated by the fallout of her actions, left London for Paris, her fashion startup bankrupt, her social circle gone. She'd lost everything in her quest for revenge, a bitter lesson in the cost of jealousy. On a crisp spring morning, Ethan and Kemi stood in a small park near his penthouse, a plaque in the ground, marking a tree they'd planted in memory of Kemi's family. Kemi's eyes were bright with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "You gave me a new life." Ethan pulled her into a hug, his heart full. "You gave me one too, Kemi. You reminded me what really matters." As they walked back to the penthouse, the sun rising over the city, Ethan knew they'd face their storms together and come out stronger on the other side.